Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together. And welcome to the Stitch Please podcast. I know y'all must get tired of hearing me saying this. And if this is your first time listening to us, you will know that I say this all the time. But I am delighted, thrilled, and honored to have the guest that we have talking with us today. I am speaking with Sahara Clemons, who is an artist based in Charlottesville, Virginia, though her work has been exhibited elsewhere. And she is also currently a student at the Rhode Island School of Design. And I guess they call it RISD. And so I'm happy to have Sahara here. She is a muralist, a painter. She does work in fabric and textiles. She sews. And we have the commonality that we both won a small grant, a soup grant from the New City Arts Initiative here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And when I won my soup award that year, Sahara was the person that handed me the ladle for the soup bowl. So the soup is a really wonderful program that New City Arts does. And basically they invite members of the community to come and eat soup and listen to artists talk about projects. And then the audience, the dinner guests, vote on the prize or vote on the winning project. And the year before I won, Sahara won. And so when I competed and I won, she gave me the golden soup ladle. And so it was really wonderful to have, to be passed the torch, so to speak, from the soup conference, from the soup competition or the soup dinner, from her to me. And that just made a special night even more special. So thank you for handing me the ladle, Sahara, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Yes, I was happy to be a part of that experience. And I guess that's sort of the birth of the podcast. And thank you so much for having me here. I've never been on a podcast before, so I'm super excited.
Oh, this is great. I'm so glad that I can show you something new because you're always showing me something new. Whenever I look at your art, your paintings, drawings, sculptures, the textile design, I'm looking at something new. So the fact that I get to show you something new is a great treat to me. And the soup grant that I won, I used the funds, I divided them in half, and half was to host an in-person event. I did a pop-up sewing studio. And then the other half was to invest in equipment to make the podcast. So it's like, I'm using my grant. See, look, we have the podcast. It's a real thing. So let's talk a little bit about the soup. What did you win when you did the soup? Tell me what you won for, and this can help us get started in talking about all the things that you do. So when you applied for the soup, what was your project?
So when I applied for the soup grant, I was a part of the incubator program at the McGuffey Art Center here in Charlottesville. And so for the project, I wanted to use the funds to enhance my art practice by getting a iPad, which has been super helpful. As you know, someone who is also a part of the soup collective, Uzo, who has become largely successful now, has been giving iPad. And so an iPad has been just such a huge help. And also just to create my work for the incubator show at the end of that year was what I utilized the grant money for. And so a large part of that was creating a wearable art piece, in addition to, I believe, 5 or 6 other paintings in the collection. And I just really had a fun time being a part of the soup grant and part of that community and utilizing that place and that space to give back to the community and be a part of the incubator program, and for people to see my work and see what I'm trying to envision for my community as a Black woman, and just all those things that I felt like that particular collection in general really just spoke to my vision and sort of, I guess, my brand as what I'm trying to develop as an artist. And so the Soup grant was really facilitative of my experiences that are happening right now.
Yes. And the thing that I guess I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, and this is something I would like to learn because I'm really interested in this kind of technology. How does an iPad help you as an artist? I know this might be a silly question for you to think about, but for me, I had an iPad and I used it to play Words with Friends in large type. Like that was what my iPad was for. I did a little bit of stuff with the banking maybe, but like I never thought about drawing with it or sketching with it or using it anything beyond like, you know what I mean? And so I'm wondering, could you talk a bit about what kind of creative processes can an iPad open for people, for artists?
Yes, absolutely. So an iPad, where I use my iPad for is, I guess usually people use it for digital work, but I also use it for the first initial stages of creating my paintings. And so I use the app or program Procreate. And that just helps me to create a basis for my paintings and visualize the colorings, the portraiture, all those things. And then if I want to tweak anything, I can go back to the drawing board, take pictures of what I currently have on my painting, and then put that back into a digital form and then rework it again. And so it's just really a great way to know how to strategically make my paintings and make my works, and from layer to layer, and know what process would be the most effective in creating the work.
And yeah, and so like, I guess I love to think about like in some ways, like almost the archive of the work lives in the device somehow. Like you could have this version and that version, and that you can really translate from this digital space. You can translate from the digital form into a form that's, I guess, maybe analogs that exists like out there in the world in a way that's not fully digital. And it makes me think about the ways that you seem to move very seamlessly between painting and like wearable art, for example. Can we talk a bit about how you navigate that transition? Like, what is the difference between making a painting and making a garment? Or I think you described this a little bit in your TEDx talk, and I will link, I'll put a link in the show notes, everybody, to Sahara's TEDx talk so you can hear her talk about art as conversation. But I thought that the pieces that you put together, this painting and then the garment that you made, they really did kind of, it was this beautiful two-way street between what some would consider art and maybe what others would consider craft. So how do you connect, or how do you shift from a drawing with a pencil on an iPad or a digital pencil on an iPad and sitting at a sewing machine to make something?
Yeah. I mean, I guess like, as you reiterated that my TEDx talk, Art as Conversation, really spoke to about how learning as an artist and creating work is about having a conversation with yourself and seeing how you can diverge out into new ways of making. And so in my art practice, I guess I really have enjoyed both painting and fashion design. And then when I brought those two things together, it just created a whole new way of thinking in terms of just what it means to have art on the body, and how that what that means in terms of shape and design. and how that kind of livens up the work as something that can be worn and walked through and lived in. And so I guess going from art as a 2D aspect and going from more of a 3D aspect, the themes are still there. The themes that I'm still trying to cultivate are still there. It's more so there's just more elements to it. So going from sewing, there's more of a trial and error aspect. As I was saying, from Procreate, I go in and out from digital to painting. You still have that kind of back and forth in sewing where you have to drape and design and then see how that works. And if it doesn't, go back to the drawing board and see what you can come up with. And also just having a whole nother element of just the materiality of wearable art in terms of unconventional materials. With either, I love using paper and origami. Those are some things that I usually like to incorporate in my wearable art, in addition to more conventional ways of making, like painting, and painting on garments is another way I like to infuse my artistry into design. And so I think I just always have had a love for color and textile in how I carry myself, and also just in my paintings. And so I really feel like robot art is just another extension of that. And so, yeah, I just like to continue to explore.
I really like this phrase you used about art on the body. And I think it's such a beautiful and precise phrase. I mean, you would think wearable art would be the same as art on the body. But for some reason, when you said art on the body, it made me think like, oh, wow, what does it mean to think about a person as a canvas? What does it mean to think about a person as a blank space on which I can either place my art, or I guess maybe that's what design is like, how do you, in the same way like you do for draping, like how do you take these fabrics that really are these, very flat objects and then turn it into something that can really enhance and really honor the human body or the human form? Do you think a lot about that when you're doing your design work? How do you imagine, like when you approach the form, the human form, the female form, the Black female form, how do you think about the body in your art, in your wearable art, and maybe even in your painting? And the reason I ask is because when you said wearing art on the body, I thought instantly of the phrase the body of art or a body of work. You know what I mean? When people talk about like someone's portfolio or someone's, I guess maybe not just a portfolio, it can't be a full body of work, but I guess a body of work seems to suggest a scope of art and artistic practice. How do you think about, like, particularly since so much of your work is centered on Black women and Black communities, do you have a particular vision in mind that you're trying to communicate or express in your painting that might show up different or look differently in textiles?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know how much of variation there really is, because as you said, looking at my body of work, I've seen or I've noticed and in my practice that I've really wanted to cultivate is the idea of what art is in terms of looking at the woman figure, and how historically that has largely been looking at nude figures, and how I've kind of wanted to shift that in a way of showing the beauty of woman also in terms of looking at clothing and how those two things interact with materiality and the skin. And so with both my 2D works, I have felt that there has still been a sense of design. My work entitled Woman in the Clouds was actually initially a fashion rendering.
Really?
Yes, it was not at first an intention to be more so. It was like a kind of meshing of what I was thinking inside in terms of my experience as a Black woman, but also in terms of my love of design and how those things kind of meshed together was what became that piece, and what really started this idea in terms of what I wanted to kind of take forth in terms of our experiences of women, experiences of Black women, as kind of bodies of vulnerability, and changing that in a way where giving life to these people by adding or just like intertwining it with art and design and fashion, and how those things all go hand in hand in terms of expression of the self, expression of our identity. And for me personally, as you said, I am a little bit of an introvert, and so I've always used fashion as a way to speak out. And so that continues with my artwork and wearable art. So I feel like there's not much of it's more of, I guess, like a spectrum, or it's more of a blurred line in terms of what is the process, or what is the end result, what is the difference between my work and 2D work versus my wearable art or fashion design.
I really absolutely love the rising of the woman in the clouds piece, and I keep wanting to call it Rising Above, because the article about the mural calls it Rising Above. New Sahara Clemons mural depicts the strength of Black women, and so I was thinking Rising Above was the name of the piece, and it's not. It's, as you said, Woman in the Clouds. But what I love about it is I can see, now that you mention it, how it could be you said a fashion study. Because that fabric that the woman in the is wearing on the reclining, when she's reclining and holding a lightning bolt in her hand, that fabric is gorgeous. And I was like, oh, I would like some of that. I wonder if that's real fabric that she found, or if she's going to just design some fabric. It's really just beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And you can really tell the things that you're describing about the depth, the texture, the textuality, all of those things show up there. Tell me a bit about the lightning bolt that she's holding. What is that harnessing? Is that about power? Is it about light? Is it about joy? Is it about this? There's something so beautiful about the way you've incorporated natural elements, like with the sun and the light and the clouds. Can you talk a bit about what it means to hold lightning?
Yeah. So for my mural, I guess I really wanted to embody a kind of an ethereal aspect to the piece. And so the title of the mural is Say Her Name. And so I wanted the lightning bolt to kind of signify a kind of a harnessing of power, but also kind of a sense of reflection and a sense of just like knowing the path of what it means to be a Black woman, what that intersectionality of race and gender, and how that kind of culminates into an experience that can be challenging, that can be difficult and adversarial, and knowing that, and also so recognizing the power that one holds as something that is delicate and should be used wisely. And so I wanted kind of that harmony to be reflected through the use of the lightning bolt, the moon, and the sun, that are all evident in the piece, in her garmentry, in her accessorizing, and of course, as you said, her power lightning bolt beam.
You know what else I love about the piece is that I like how she's reclining, and I feel like. I can tell you my thought. Actually, I was going to tell you my thought about the reclining, but maybe I should hear your thought first, or do you want to hear my thought about the reclining, and then you'll tell me what the right answer is?
Um, I will say I would want to hear your, I guess, answer, but I guess I would say that, as I said, art is a conversation. So no, there is no right answer. There is only just exploration and extension of what we see in the art, and then it kind of creates its own answer within everyone else.
Oh, you are so smart. I bet you're up there killing them up there at RISD. I mean, really, that is a beautiful answer. Okay, so what I thought when I saw her reclining, I was just thinking about the importance of Black women and rest, and how I know there's a project that I love called the NAP Ministry, and it's a Black woman-led, actually theological project where she is on a mission for to educate Black people, and I think everybody, but Black people in particular, about, you know, the dangers of capitalism and how it extracts labor from us and how we're not allowed to rest. That she sees basically rest as reparation. She sees rest as resistance. It's really a beautiful project. And so I was like, to see this woman like reclining on her side in nature, in a natural environment, and still to be so powerful. It just felt to me like, I don't know, there was just something in there that seemed really valuable. And for me, since I'm looking at it right this minute, like in a small format on a computer screen, instead of seeing it live and big, I couldn't tell if her eyes were opened or closed. And on my screen, because it's a small computer, her eyes look closed. But then when I look closely, they're open. And so there's something about the idea that you can imagine her with her eyes closed, you can imagine her with her eyes open. But there's something about the idea of rest, and how with, you know, the power that Black women do have, but how there's always, it seems to be an expectation that we're kind of constantly moving. And there was something about having this person be still, you know, and just like, I don't know, relishing her power, which is so great that she doesn't even have to sit up or stand up to wield it. It just comes to her naturally. I don't know. That was what I thought. That's what I saw in it. I don't know, when you create a piece like this, do you have intentions that say, okay, instead of having her standing or sitting in a chair or in profile, I'm going to position her body this way? Does that impact how you start to, you know, shape out or sketch out a painting?
Yes, it absolutely does. Her position was actually a very hard thing for me to finalize. But all the things that you said previously, those were things that I was thinking about. And she was, in fact, always sitting when I was doing the sketches. She was always in a reclining position. But I just needed to figure out the best way I wanted to express those themes of rest and that the kind of exploitation we get of Black women and our work and our labor. And so my mother was a big inspiration for this piece, and just the things that she does in the Charlottesville community, and her relationship with me, all of those things. Things that impacted the way that I was creating the mural and how I wanted to showcase this kind of unveiling of what it means to be a Black woman, and especially in this time of this unrest, where how people react to not necessarily new things that are happening within the Black community, and how that impacts the Black community in terms of everyone kind of gaining this uprising, and how it's tiring, and it's laborious. We're all dealing with this history of racial injustice and how it's happening now. It's just difficult to keep up with the power that we hold in terms of education and resistance and activism, but also just our own interpersonal dealings with these things. And so that was really what I wanted to culminate in her position, in the lightning bolt, and just the entirety of the piece.
I think you really achieved everything that you're describing and more. And as you said, whenever somebody sees this, they are going to have a dialogue with it or a conversation with it in their own imagination. And it was so funny, Sahara, when you were just speaking and you said the word unrest. That was the first time I actually heard the root rest in that word. We talk about civil unrest as if usually society is at rest. And society is not often at rest because we have so many damaging and vexed systems that are constantly plaguing the lives of many people, especially those who've been marginalized in some way. And so it makes me just think about unrest, the relationship between unrest and rest and activism and the burdens, as you were describing, that just impinge on the lives of Black people all the time. And that, I don't know, it was just so beautifully put. So thank you so much for sharing that. I want to take a quick break, everybody. And when we come back, I want to ask her about design school and what that's like, because it sounds like it's a lot of fun. Stay tuned. The Stitch Please podcast is really growing. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast and ask a favor. If you are listening to this podcast on a medium that allows you to rate it or review it, for example, Apple Podcasts or iTunes, please do so. If you're enjoying the podcast, if you could drop me a 5-star rating, if you have something to say about the podcast, and you wanted to include that, a couple sentences in the review box of Apple makes a really big difference in how the podcast is evaluated by Apple, how it becomes more visible. It really is a way to kind of lean into the algorithm that helps to rank podcasts. So if you had time to do that, to drop a little line in the review feature of the podcast, that would be really appreciated, and it would help us to grow even further and faster. We are back, and you are listening to the Stitch Please podcast. I'm Lisa Woolfolk, your host, and I am talking with Sahara Clemons, who is an artist, designer, sewist, a theoretician, an activist, and she is doing all of this and continuing her studies at the Rhode Island School of Design, where she is heading into her, is this your second year?
Yes.
And she's heading into her second year. Can we talk a bit about RISD? I did my undergraduate education at a small women's college in Boston, and that was the first time I had ever heard about RISD. And what I had heard was that it was the premier school for art and design. Now, I have since learned that there's other schools of art and design, but I think because I learned about RISD first, I think I learned about RISD about the same age that you are right now. And so because of that, I think it's implanted in my mind as, oh, RISD, design school. The end. I since learned that there's Pratt and there's this and there's schools in New York, there's schools everywhere. That I just talked with a woman a few months ago who's fantastic, who went to Mississippi State University. They have them at they're design schools all over. Tell me about why RISD and what RISD has, what your experience has been like there.
Man, I guess it's a little weird going.
I know it's so weird. It's a weird big question on the heels of a weird big year. And so this is, it's hard to say what it's even been like, right? Considering that it's probably been like a lot of things, and then coronavirus happened, and then it became something else entirely. Right. So maybe do you think you could formulate something about just the overall, and then maybe I might ask you about some courses that you really liked.
Absolutely. So I guess overall I had a very wonderful experience at RISD. I guess it's a little difficult to go back to senior year and making that decision of what college I was going to go to. But I really just love the RISD community. And I don't know, I guess there's just something about it, something about Rhode Island, something about Providence that I really enjoyed. And I also just really loved my first year in terms of how much it challenged me. Of course, you have the normalcies of college in terms of independence, and being by yourself for the first time, and what that means in terms of just living on your own and being responsible, but also just being in an art school in particular, and how you go through, I guess to me, it felt like a little bit of Project Runway, where you had 3 projects a week, and you had to quickly figure out what you wanted to do and hope for the best.
I think that you just sold everybody on RISD. I think all the sewists who listen to me regularly are like, oh, wait, I could go to a college that's like Project Runway, and they'll give me like, here's your challenge designers, and like that. That sounds really exciting.
It definitely was. I really felt like I learned a lot from my peers and my professors. I felt like, I don't know, I think that when you're on your own as an artist, you can easily stagger into like a hole, and if you don't really know what questions to be asking yourself, and so I feel like that's what RISD did for me, is help me figure out what those questions were, and ways to solve them, and produce things that I wouldn't have produced before. And so I think that's just the beauty of art school, is that you get this time that is just freedom, that you can experience, where when you're on your own, it feels like you have some sort of expectation for yourself to create something that fits into your brand, fits into what you have been showing before. Whereas in school, it's a whole different ballgame. You can do whatever you want. You can experiment, and you can fail. And so I always felt like when I was there, I never wanted to look at things that people had done in the past. If it was offered to look at samples, I never wanted to do that, because I didn't want to get an expectation of what I had to do or what should be done, and just see what my peers had created in that moment. And so I think that really helped. I think that was really beneficial for me. And yeah, I mean, I guess like socially, I had a really interesting time at RISD. I felt like I was able to get out of my shell a bit and make a great group of friends. And I learned a lot about myself, and how I navigate around the world, or just around people, and just kind of get a greater understanding. And so college is difficult.
Yes.
On
yes.
multiple levels. And so I learned that pretty quickly. And so I'm really glad. I don't feel like I would have changed something about my first year experience, because I think it definitely was critical for me to learn those lessons. And so, but I guess the one thing I would say that I had difficulty with is actually when I did have more of a choice to align things with the themes of my work and what I'm doing currently, and how the racial themes in my work, how that played into what we have critiques at RISD.
Yes.
So there's often, I didn't know this until actually after the end of my first year, is that there is a common silence in this critique where it's based around racial themes in artwork. And so I always thought it was just me or something, but it's a whole entire thing that happens in terms of how we speak up about race and how we this kind of sensitivity that's happening nowadays in terms of how we talk about race, and so how that reflects in art classes is very interesting and is actually very impactful to an artist's experience. And so that would be one thing that I would hope would get better at RISD and would hopefully would just bring more forefront or more priority in terms of educating and just seeing how we can change this dynamic in terms of being afraid to speak on racial issues.
And did you find that concern as part of the peer review process, or did you find that from faculty as well? Did it go in both directions? I know that, and I ask because I know that in institutions across the country, people are trying to figure out how to incorporate these kind of conversations into all aspects of the curriculum. People in architecture schools are thinking about it. People in art schools are thinking about it. People in English departments are thinking about it, in math. And it's not that people are trying, that institutions, at least some quarters within institutions, are trying to say, how can we prevent, I can't speak for people. How about I speak for myself? For myself, as a professor, as someone who teaches literature and culture, I want to ask my students, how can we have these conversations? How can we think through these problems in ways that actually disrupt and dismantle these systems that have been harming all of us for, some people, it's been harming Black people to really severe degrees, but these are also similarly harmful to white people too. How do we disrupt these if we can't even begin to have, if people are saying things like, when I look at you, I don't see color. If they feel like somehow a critique about racism and white supremacy is impolite. And so I'm wondering, did you notice a reticence where did the reticence come from? And, perhaps you perceive it as a well-intentioned reticence, and maybe you don't want to say like, well, it was this teacher in this class. I'm sure you wouldn't want to do that. But like, do you see what I'm asking? Like, I remember from my own college experience, like going and people, I went to a school in the north, up in a small school in Boston, and the students that I met, even the same was true of graduate school. A lot of them didn't have a lot of experience with Black people, and so like they didn't know what to say or they didn't know how to talk. And that was very frustrating for me because I had been Black my whole Black life and had known nothing but Black people. And so I knew we weren't like, something that you had, we were people just like people. Right. And so I don't know, it's just weird to kind of be in these types of environments and think about ways to navigate something that was really just your daily life. And so that was a kind of a surprising thing for me. Did that show up for you in ways that might shape your artistic practice moving forward?
I mean, I feel like it's just knowing where you can just get that feedback and get that advice. And that's really kind of where the root is it is both peers and professors alike, and how, what are things that could be worked up to change the dynamic? What are things that we can just automatically say to just relieve the tension in the room, and then pick up the conversation? So I've been lucky to have people in my life that have been able to respond to my work and tell me what things are working and things are not, because it's difficult when you're talking about these themes that you need to know, like these are your key audience, people who don't know how to articulate these things, and you're trying to express that. How do you know if it is coming across? How do you know if they can build on the conversation, if they won't connect with it, if they won't partake in the conversation themselves? And so you have to ask, is that something that you have created on your part? Is that something that you have built with your work, or is that something that is larger than that? Is it something that is more of a systematic thing, in which case that needs to be resolved? And so that's a challenging part of it when you're dealing with art, is that it's a fine line in terms of what we speak on. How do we speak on good racially based art? Like, what does that actually mean? And so I guess that's just something that really needs to be kind of looked at further in terms of the art curriculum, is how do we not just develop the skills, but also just develop more of more education in terms of what we're trying to articulate in our work. Because not everyone knows. We have our own experiences, but I know for sure that I don't know everything.
Right?
I know exactly everything. And so when you're dealing with these themes, you can only go so far on your own.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that when you're talking about an art curriculum, one of the things that I would think would be important is that, that Black people aren't the only people who have race. White people are raced as well. And so if someone can say, oh, this is racial art because it's from a Black person, then when white people produce art, that is similarly racial because white people have race. That's something that Toni Morrison talked a lot about, was that white people sometimes forget that they are a race, that they have race and they carry that with them and it impacts everything they do, just like our race impacts everything that we do. And so that type of invisibility or that type of naturalization of whiteness shows up in so many aspects of, and this is what the consequence of living in a white supremacist society, that it's not like I tell students, white supremacy isn't just Klansmen. It's this assumption that everything is white and that white then becomes neutral and the default, so that we don't have to talk about it because it's not marked and therefore it doesn't exist. All of that is just some dangerous mental gymnastics that operate in a way that centers whiteness everywhere. You know what I wanted to ask you about? I really love the artist conversation. And so I guess I'm turning a little bit to talk about what it means for you as an artist who also identifies or describes herself as an introvert. How hard is that? Like, that seems like that would be like, is that hard? Is it easy? Does it help to kind of fuel your creativity because you are reserved in the way that you interact with other people? Or does it not make a difference?
I would say it, unconsciously, I'm sure it does make a difference. I mean, we are who we are, but, I would say that I think that my art in the way I process and how I make art, my introversion has definitely played a role in terms of just how I see the world and how I see and how I observe, and then also just how I feel. I like how I kind of parallel my introversion with my artwork, and so I feel like I've always wanted to have a sense of subtlety and discretion in my work, but also a sense of boldness and blatant symbols and kind of motifs in my work, to act as sort of some sense of expression of the themes. And so I think both of those things are what I try to capitalize on. And so creating work is definitely a difficult task, because I'm always asking myself, is this something that is archetypal? Is this something that's universal, or is this something that will come across? And so I feel like I've always wanted to say more by saying less.
Beautiful.
And so I've always wanted to do that in my work, and I feel like that ties into how I am personality wise. And so, yeah, I guess I feel like I've always been a little quiet, but I also feel like that has been an asset.
It really is working out so beautifully for you, and you are still at the early part of your journey, and that's why I'm so delighted to be able to speak with you today. I wanted to just close with what's next for you. I see that in a couple of days you have something called Art Against the Clock.
Yes, yeah. I will be at the Bridge Art Against the Clock on Sunday. 2:30 p.m. I'll be doing a live stream of a piece. And so it's a fundraiser, so you can send tips in to the Bridge. And whoever has the largest tip will be getting an SGC original. And so, yeah, I'm super excited. I guess this is part of my introversion. I'm a little freaked out in terms of showing the process of my work. Sometimes I feel like it's a bit of a hindrance for someone to see my work, me doing it. So this will be an interesting experience. So right now, I guess I've been trying to take a little bit of time to do some personal work before I go to school. But yeah, I'm definitely excited to do a live stream of a painting. So yeah.
That sounds very fun and very brave for someone who describes herself as an introvert. I think that's going to be streamed on Facebook Live, and I'm like, oh, I get to see it. This is going to be awesome. And so, no, I just wanted. And where can people find you on the socials? Where can people find you if they want to look at some of your images and purchase some art? Like, where's the best way people can reach you?
So they can reach me on Instagram at SGC Originals. I'm in the works of creating a website. So I guess stay tuned to that. But yes, and currently commissions are open. But that is a really minute time span.
Yeah, By the time you've heard this program, she will no longer be accepting commission.
So, yes, there you go.
That's fantastic. Sahara, thank you so much. We've been listening to Sahara Clemons, who is an artist, designer, fashion designer, muralist, and in her second year at the Rhode Island School of Design. You can find her work on Instagram, and she has limited availability for commissions. Thank you so much, Sahara, for joining us today. We're so grateful.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Stitch Please podcast, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you supporting us by listening to the podcast. If you'd like to reach out to us with questions, you can contact us at blackwomenstitch@gmail.com. If you'd like to support us financially, you can do that by supporting us on Patreon, Patreon. And you can find Black Women Stitch there in the Patreon directory. And for as little as $2 a month, you can help support the project with things like editing, transcripts, and other things to strengthen the podcast. And finally, if financial support is not something you can do right now, you can really, really help the podcast by rating it and reviewing it anywhere you listen to podcasts that allows you to review them. So I know that not all podcast directories or services allow for reviews, but for those who do, for those that have like a star rating or just ask for a few comments, if you could share those comments and say nice things about us at the Stitch Please podcast, that is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. Come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.